Go ahead.
Let me jump on my soapbox for just a minute, because there may be those looking at this program and talking about Twilight, they're talking about stuff that is not targeted to me. Actually, nobody here, we're not the target audience for what we're going to talk about tonight. It occurs to me, gentlemen, that one of the prices we pay for being Seventh-day Adventists is vigilance. You don't really get to take a nap. You know, you've got to be awake and alert at all times. Popular culture is making its inroads into the church. Serving Jesus has never been a spectator sport, and it certainly is not now in these last days. You've got to be awake and alert all the time. So someone may be saying, I'm not going to watch that because I don't have a problem with that stuff. But you got kids, you got grandkids, you have pathfinders in your church,
kids next door,
children next door, you have children over whom you have influence. You don't really get points for being ignorant anymore. I'm speaking kind of plain. You've got to know, because right in your own home things could be going on, or in the home of your grandchildren, or your neighbor's children, or the people that you may be allowing your child to spend the night at their home. You know, these things are going on. So you need to be aware, you need to be alert, and so this is one of those programs that seeks to inform you of some stuff that's going on in the world today that we who are not the target audience of this stuff need to be aware of. They're not trying to get Steve Wohlberg. They're not trying to get C.A. Murray. They're sure not trying to get Jim Gilley. They're trying to get your pre-teenage daughter, your teenage daughter, your post-teenage daughter, and her boyfriend. That's the target audience. So if you know anybody like that, or have influence over anyone like that, you really need to inform yourself, because you may be the last hope for somebody who's going down a road they don't even know where that road leads. So we encourage you, stick with us on this stuff, because this is something that you need to know about and need to be aware of.
It is a 3ABN book.
Yes.
It is the first time we have partnered with a publisher that is not a part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's Destiny
Image, a major evangelical publisher, a great reputation, and that book is not only in the ABCs, but it's now in all family Christian stores, and Destiny Image is totally behind it. They're wonderful people there. We have a great relationship, and we're just thrilled for this cooperative relationship to help get this book out.
We are. We thought that this would be a much broader circulation for the book, and so it's sort of an experiment, too, with 3ABN. Because we wanted to see how this would work with you and with Destiny.
It's very timely, and the interest is stellar in the subject. Just in the last week and a half, I've been on major radio shows discussing this. One show I was on, it was broadcast into 110 different stations, national, coast to coast, discussing Twilight, and all the phone lines lit up. And it was quite an opportunity to share Christ.
And that's the name of the book, The Trouble with Twilight.
Trouble with Twilight, And really easy read. You're a good writer. You are. And I've read half of it in just the past couple of hours. Really informative, really easy read, really good stuff. Now, we need to sort of loose you and let you go, man, so we can go into our subject, because there's somebody sitting out there scratching and saying, Twilight? What is Twilight? Who be Twilight? What is Twilight? You know, walk us through this experience, Steve. Just take us through step by step.
Sure. Well, to start out by saying the Twilight series of novels and movies right now is really bigger than Harry Potter. It has replaced Harry Potter in popularity, especially among teenage girls. It is just, you know, go to the airports, go into the bookstores, you'll see Twilight is everywhere, and the series has become so popular that they've decided, Summit Entertainment has decided to make them into, they took the first book and made it into a movie to see if it would fly. And it grossed, it brought in $70 million opening weekend. This was in November of '08. And then once they saw that, they thought, hey, we're going to make a movie from every book. There's 4 books in the Twilight series. And so they took the first one, it was a big success. They took the second book and made it into a movie. It came out last November, or '09. And it grossed $140 million opening weekend. And the third movie, Eclipse, came out in June 30 of 2010, and it gathered in $68.5 million in one day. It opened on a Wednesday, and so it became the #1 premiere of a Wednesday film of all time.
Now, see, a number of things jump out. Number one, as a rule, you don't open a movie in the middle of the week. People don't go to movies in the middle of it unless you know you've got a successful franchise on your hand.
That's right, and they do.
Then to pull in $68 million in one day on a Wednesday in the summer says that somebody's consuming this stuff. So this is something that needs to be watched, because it has an effect. It's being affected
That's
and
right.
effective, rather.
It's big in popular culture. And I often say to people when I talk about this in front of audiences, I'll say, I'll say, how many of you have heard of Twilight? And probably half to 3/4 of the hands go up. And then I'll say, those of you that don't know anything about it, and there are those that never heard of it until this moment. I say the reason why you haven't heard of it is because you're just a good Christian that's not up on popular culture. And I'm certainly not criticizing those that don't know about it, but the reality is that it's sweeping the country, sweeping the world, many languages. It's a gigantic cultural force in this world. And I have been watching this for quite a while, and the Lord has led me to put this book together. As I mentioned, I've been on radio shows, I've been discussing this. I'm very concerned about teenagers, and we can go into the reasons why, because, you know, I feel like I'm a David against a Goliath, because the majority of people, viewers and watchers who love Twilight, just think, you know, what are you doing? How can you find anything wrong with Twilight? And I also want to clarify that I'm not on a crusade to take a stake and drive it into the heart of Twilight fans. Certainly not. I know why people like the series, and there are certain elements within it, the love affair between Bella and Edward, that just grips people's hearts, and the thrills of the vampires and the werewolves. But there are some very real, subtle dangers within the series that I document in my book, and that's what this program is all about, to expose those and to point to Jesus as the alternative.
When you go back into Scripture, and when I read the text about Babylon, do you see some of this as being sort of a fulfillment in Revelation of Babylon and some of the things that
Yes, I do. When you read the book of Revelation, chapter 17, verse 5, it talks about mystery. It says, upon her forehead was a name written, mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So there is a mystery Babylon that deceives the world in the book of Revelation. In chapter 18, verse 23, there's one sentence that has really impressed me. It says that by her sorceries were all the nations deceived. And so Babylon is involved in sorcery. Now, the Greek word for sorcery here has a number of different shades of meaning, but real occultic sorcery is part of it. And if you go back to ancient Babylon in Bible days, the ancient city, it was permeated with occultism. In Daniel chapter 2, I'm sure you remember the story of Nebuchadnezzar. He had the dream and he didn't remember it. He woke up and he gathered his advisors around him to hopefully tell him the dream and interpret it. And you remember who those advisors were. They were magicians, astrologers, and sorcerers. Right. So ancient Babylon was permeated with this. We read the same thing in the book of Isaiah and other verses. And so if the Babylon of the book of Revelation has her sorceries that deceives the whole world, and if ancient Babylon was full of occultism, which is really the root of the Babylon in the Revelation, in the book of Revelation, then it makes sense that that the Babylonian deceptions of these last days would also involve and incorporate occultism in them. And that is what is happening right now in the world. And as I will demonstrate, Twilight, Harry Potter and Twilight is part of that trend.
Now, how did this whole concept get started, Twilight, and the author, how did they get into this?
Yes, as I mentioned, it's a series of 4 books. It was written by a woman named Stephanie Meyer. And this is an amazing insight or revelation, really, to understand that the entire Twilight phenomena, the whole saga, originated in a dream. Stephanie Meyer was a Mormon woman living in the Phoenix area, a mother of 3, and living a fairly normal life. And June 1, 2003, she went to bed. And her life has never been the same. She had a dream that night, and she has said this and gone into the details on her own website, where she saw this handsome, sparkly boy who was a vampire in a meadow, a young boy, or a teenage boy, and then she saw this girl, a teenage girl, a normal, average teenager, and the two of them were discussing their relationship, that they had fallen in love, and he was having a hard time resisting doing what vampires do with her, and so they talked and talked and talked. And when Stephanie Meyer woke up in the morning, and she has publicly stated this, that those two characters, the boy and the girl, the vampire boy and the normal girl, were voices in her head that would not shut up. And she was compelled to begin to write a story out, which eventually became the Twilight book. And she didn't know anything about publishing, so she Googled a publisher, trying to find a publisher. And she sent out her manuscript. She landed a huge publishing contract with a major publisher, offered her $750,000. And then before she knew it, she's on the track to become as wealthy as J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter series. And so it's important to realize that the whole Twilight series originated in a dream. And it's also amazing that after the first Twilight book was published, Stephenie Meyer had another dream. And in her second dream, the vampire boy character appeared to her like a ghost. And he strongly rebuked her for sanitizing some of the things that he had given her in the first dream. In the Twilight series, Stephenie Meyer has made Edward Cullen, who is the main vampire boy, out to be a, quote, vegetarian, which means that he doesn't drink human blood, he just drinks animal blood. And he's a good guy in the series. And this spirit, this ghost, corrected Stephenie Meyer and accused her of sanitizing the script that he had given her in the first dream. And she herself says publicly that he was terrifying in the second dream. So I look at this and I think, okay, you know, dreams can come from three major sources. One can come from God. God can give a dream. The devil can give a dream. Or we can just have a dream because we dream.
You had some pizza before you went to bed, and you're going to dream.
That's right. And if you look at Stephenie Meyer's dream and how it has catapulted her into global fame, and how the storyline is interwoven with occultism, which we can talk more about, and just you look at all the dynamics of the series, the first dream, the second dream, you have to ask yourself, you know, did this dream just come from her mind? It didn't come from God. And so did it come from the devil? And is it part of a strategy of Satan to, just like with Harry Potter, and I'm totally convinced of this, is he behind this to mold a generation of young people, especially toward the occult? That is my conviction, that is exactly what's happening, and I can document that in my book, The Trouble with Twilight.
And the circumstantial evidence, Steve, is almost overwhelming. I was reading that in the book. You get this idea that this woman is driven. She is driven by a force, and a force that makes available to her very quickly large sums of money. As a rule, a first-time author doesn't get a $700,000+ contract right off the bat. And then someone says, okay, let's make it and they start shoveling tons of money at you, and you go from anonymity to overnight success. And what you're doing becomes a worldwide saturating phenomena. There's something driving that. And as I read your book, you're possessed by the idea something's moving this thing along, and it's not coming from the Lord.
That's right. And where's it going? This is interesting. Just 2 days ago, somebody emailed this to me. Summit Entertainment, the main entertainment company that has produced the Twilight films, their reps recently told Entertainment Weekly that both Breaking Dawn films, they're taking the last book and they're dividing it into 2 films, and these are still on the horizon up ahead of us. It says both Breaking Dawn films will be PG-13, making fans wonder just how graphic the film could get. But Melissa Rosenberg, who is the screenwriter for all of the Twilight films, she told fans on her Facebook page that she would ensure plenty of blood and sex in those films. So where is it going? You know, people say, hey, Twilight it's just so, a lot of it's so benign, but they don't realize there's a lot of subtle occultism in it, and where's it going? And look at what the screenwriter said about the movie. With the final 2 movies. Where is this heading? And that's what the devil looks at. He looks at the big picture. You know, in the 1980s, homosexuality, they say, came out of the closet. In the 1990s, it was witchcraft coming out of the broom closet called Wicca, and it became very popular. It still is popular as what they call white magic. And now what's happening is vampirism is coming out of the coffin, and we are seeing a trend in our society, not just fiction, but there is a real trend among young people and professionals, not just among the Gothic fringe, that are actually experimenting with really drinking blood, getting into vampirism. Sean Hannity talked about it on Fox News, or on his Hannity's America ABC News has talked about it, 2020, 60 Minutes. There's a whole host. The Washington Post, they've all done stories